My next question has to do with, it's page 18 of ours slide here. Might be page 16 of the slides. It says that it's got to do with the producing of potable drinking water. It says it undergoes additional treatment before it's being distributed. Do they have to add additional processes to take place to make it potable?
Not at all, through you, Madam Chair, no. In this case, they've already got every facility within our watershed. Again, if you're a water intake area, there's source water protection that's being completed right now, looking at intake protection zones. And there's specific regulation going to be required for what can be done within an intake protection zone. The discharge of this facility is nowhere near an intake protection zone, which is number one. If it was, then again, we would have had to voice a concern. The additional treatment that water already goes through as part of the multi-barrier approach the province has adopted will deal with any contaminants within the water, primarily, and the water again is tested. So we don't see how this will impact any of the drinking water intakes on the lake itself. There is no impact to groundwater because the water again is being discharged right now into the river. But even if the water was used on the ground, because of its extreme good quality, there's not going to be an impact. I was in Australia a couple of years ago, and in Brisbane, they have a facility similar to the one being proposed here. It discharges into the drinking water reservoir, and their water intake pipe is located 500 meters away, and it takes the water that is discharged essentially into the reservoir, and they use it to drink. Now, that's an extreme case because they have a water shortage, so they need the water. But essentially, that's the same problem that we would have here. If you wanted to, you could look at, in some regards, using this as almost drinking water because it is that clean when it comes through the reverse osmosis process.
Okay. And then on page 19, you've touched on it a little bit about about posing problems with the ice freezing. And my concern is about winter tourism. It obviously will impact if the region decides that they have to even find alternative snowmobile trails, because there's many of the businesses that are on the river that if the snowmobilers are rerouted somewhere else, the possibility of them stopping into those businesses is going to be affected. Now, have they been consulted on?
They are well aware of, yeah, through you, Madam Chair, they're aware of the issue associated with the water temperature and the potential that might have on the recreational, especially the snowmobiling. How they're going to mitigate it, I honestly don't know. There are ways that they could cool the water down before it is discharged. But right now, the biggest concern we have overall is that we're not seeing ice formation anywhere within the watershed being very good because of climate change. So when you factor that in, an alternative route probably would be the most safest at this point. But again, that's up to the proponent. The region will have to, they will be proposing how they best mitigate impacts associated with the facility. And they have identified that there are impacts.
Okay, so and in your opinion too, Mike, they will have to sign that the discharge areas are going to be dangerous areas.
If there's problems with ice formation, they would probably be signed as well, I would imagine.
Okay. Only a couple more. Two more? Maybe three. It's page 27. And this is where you were saying about the sale of water to other proponents to use it for different reasons, and the land. And I mean, I came by someone on the Mount Albert side road today that's watering their potatoes, and I know that it's coming off of from a river over there, so I understand where you're coming from about the lowering of the water table in those rivers. But using this water, the nutrient-rich water, for irrigation purposes, there would be a possibility of it ending up back in the river And could this not potentially do more damage to the river?
Through you, Madam Chair, the water reuse option is something that they're going to have to really research in depth. And it would be my understanding there's no criteria right now for water reuse within the province. So the province will be using this actually as probably a guinea pig moving forward. This will be a pilot project if water reuse is a viable option. They would have to set the criteria to be able to say this is what can be discharged on certain lands. And I would not doubt that there'll be a certificate of approval or a requirement on behalf of the landowner to follow a certain practice in the use of that water. So for example, if it's raining outside, they shouldn't be watering their crop. So the wise use of that water would be one aspect. Number two, if they actually charge for the water, I think it would reduce the usage as well. So they would only use what they need. And with respect to the nutrient, under the Nutrient Management Act, they'll have to factor in that nutrient into their nutrient management plan. So if they're adding fertilizer and they're adding this water, in all likelihood, they'll have to reduce some of the fertilizer that they add. They can only add as much fertilizer as the crop requires under the Nutrient Management Act. So they would have to alter their nutrient management plan to account for the water reuse.
What effect would that happen or have on the river? I just don't see any. Maybe you did just mention it, but I didn't catch it.
We've actually done the worst case scenario with the discharge. We had a Hurricane Hazel happen, which, as you know, is our big regional flood event. And then we added the discharge on top. Because the area is so inundated by water, again, the difference is less than 2 millimeters. So you're not going to see an expansive change in the floodplain associated with the discharge. The other thing to remember is the discharge is constant throughout the day. And it actually follows peaks and valleys based on the users. And for example, the Super Bowl, everybody runs the commercial and flushes. The plant gets peak use then. You'll see that through the day with a sewage treatment plant. It'll go up and down. So during a flood event, no impact whatsoever. Like you're talking that much of a width. So we looked at the flood lines and the expanse, and our models essentially showed the lines being where the lines were before. So it's not even the thickness of the line itself that is changed. So again, we're confident that the discharge, even during those high flow events, is not going to be impactful on anyone. And as we are the required under Section 28 to manage hazard lands, if there was an issue, and that was our first comment to the region, if there was an issue, again, we would have to raise a concern at the environmental study phase.